Hebrews chapter 1, verse 2. We got through all of a verse and a half last week as we jumped into the book of Hebrews, but let me introduce Hebrews chapter 1, verse 2b, that means the second half of the verse, with this reality. In order to deconstruct Christianity, you must first demote Jesus from being the Son of God to being just a really nice guy. Once Jesus is a really nice guy, you can make Christianity whatever you want it to be, and you can believe whatever you want to believe. You can get along with the ways of the world, and you can align yourself with whatever values, thoughts, and whatever works best for your emotional health. But if Jesus is who he says he is, the Son of God, the reality of that demands an authority, a truth that we orient ourselves to. And it is not a new strategy to demote Jesus Christ from being the Son of God to being a really nice guy. That's what's been happening since the very beginning. Some people want Jesus to be a spiritual teacher. Some people want him to be a messenger or a moral exemplar or a political revolutionary. Some people want Jesus to be a therapist to heal your wounds. And if Jesus is less than the Son of God, then you can make him into whatever you want to fulfill whatever you want or whatever you need and whatever the world thinks he should be. So over and over again, the strategy is the same. Demote Jesus. That's why there's thousands of reinterpretations of Jesus. That's why every religion and world movement has a description, a reinvention of Jesus. Not the Jesus of the Bible, but a reinvention of Jesus because you have to. The Quran says that Jesus is a prophet, not the Son of God. Mormons say that Jesus is the spirit child of the Father. Pluralists say that Jesus is one of the valid paths among many, a helpful guide amongst many helpful guides. New Age spirituality says that Jesus is enlightened, someone uniquely in tune to the divine in everyone, whatever that means. The deconstructing progressives believe that Jesus is not divine Lord who must be believed and obeyed, but a model of love and inclusion and justice. And there's always some new, not really new, interpretation of Jesus, but there's one problem. Jesus defines Jesus, not us. The same way we define, in many ways, who we are. We can't tell other people who they are. Jesus defines who he is. And so in Hebrews 1, God confronts every lesser version of Jesus. The author is setting the Son of God before us all in unmatched glory. And Jesus is not merely one messenger among many. He is greater than every other guru or influencer that you could ever hear or listen to. And so the author of Hebrews is arguing this. He's saying, stand firm in the faith, because Jesus is who he says he is. And that's the message of our text in Hebrews chapter 1. It is theologically rich, but it is applicationally oriented. Okay, and I want you to see this. So we're going to talk about things that perhaps you heard, their orthodox theological truth about who Jesus Christ is, but it's all oriented upon an applicational idea that you and I are faced with every single day. And so that's what this morning is all about. But let's read the text first as we start. Read the text, Hebrews chapter 1, verse 1. We'll just start there because we're only a verse and a half in. So we can read that for context, but then we'll start. Our text for this morning starts in 2b, and it goes all the way to verse 4. Chapter 1. Verse 1. Long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, through whom also he created the world. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature. He upholds the universe by the word of his power, and after making purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. Last week, we learned about that first verse and a half. God speaks, and God is speaking most clearly and finally through his Son, Jesus Christ. Everyone ought to listen. Then the author unfolds 6 brief but profoundly packed phrases in our text this morning that reveal the greatness of Jesus over everything else. I want you to notice a few things. I threw it on a slide for you. We've talked about this frequently through our studies of different books of the Bible, but these verses from 2b to verse 4 is a chiasm. Okay, a chiasm is an ancient poetic device. In ancient poetry, they didn't rhyme. They didn't use meter. They didn't rhyme the last sounds of every line. In ancient poetry, they paralleled ideas. And so a chiasm is this idea. I want to throw those verses up. Sean, you can throw those verses up there in the text. You see how the verses, this is just 2b through 4, but they're indented. And the idea is that, in a chiasm, is that the outside, the first line and the last line are parallel ideas. And then the second line and the second to last line are parallel ideas. And then the main idea is centered in the middle, the focus of everything else by which the other ideas hinge. It's a chiasm. And you can see that by the way that the text is indented on the screen. The central idea is that he is the radiance of the glory of God, the exact imprint of his nature. But the secondary idea is that he created and sustained the world. That's the second line and the second to last line. And then the first line, appointed heir of all things, sitting at the right hand of Majesty on high. They're parallel ideas. And so this chiasm really forms our outline this morning and the structure of what we want to present in the text. And as you can see, it's just packed with profound theological truth. And there's many similar sections like this about who Christ is. We saw a similar truths in the book of Colossians about the deity of Christ and his supremacy over all things. You see similar ideas in the Gospel of John about who Christ is. But this context is so particular and unique and so necessary for us today because as modern Christians, we have many ideas being thrown at us all the time. The world is teaching us many ideas, and we carry around in our pockets every day just like this megaphone of worldly ideas and theology. We can go online and pick what we want to believe, and yet the author of Hebrews wants us to know that God has spoken most finally and ultimately through his Son, as we saw last week. But look at chapter 2, verse 1. After the culmination of this, there's some description about Jesus and how he's greater than angels. We'll see that next week. But the two ideas, what we learned this week and what we'll learn next week about angels, the conclusion is this. Look at chapter 2, verse 1. Therefore, we must pay much closer attention to what we've heard, lest we drift away from it. See, it's all about who are you listening to? And you should listen to Jesus. You should listen to Jesus, not the gurus, not the life coaches, not the blogs and the podcasts. You should listen to Jesus because who he is means he brings better authoritative truth to you that you must submit to. And that's the idea here. That's why the author in the end of chapter 1, we'll see next week, he compares Jesus to angels. Because the people that the author is writing to revered angels. They were messengers from God. Some would even worship angels. Some believed Michael was greater than the Messiah. All these kind of absurd ideas. They treated the angels as though they were mediators rather than just servants, and they revered them highly, and they wanted to hear from the angels. They wanted to hear like Daniel heard, like we saw through their study in the book of Daniel. They wanted to hear, they listened to the message of angels. They wanted revelation from the angels, but the author of Hebrews is like, Jesus is so much better. We'll look at that more next week, and most likely, though, angels are not really your problem, right? No one's here this morning being like, very few of us are like, I just really wish an angel would visit me and tell me what to do. Okay, that's not your jam. But this text in general is about who you're listening to. In the world, there's 1,000 blogs, podcasts, and really what we do today with the idea that how much of our world functions and how we often will catch ourselves. What you do is you have a question about parenting, you have a question about this situation, what do I do? And you can go online now. You can go poll the world on Reddit. Am I the jerk, right, when this situation happens? It doesn't say jerk on Reddit, by the way. Right? Am I right? And you can find people who are in similar situations as you. They have the same parentage that you did. They face the same circumstances at work. They're the same gender, the same culture, the same minority group, the same experiences and situations. And they speak on these blogs, and you're like, oh, yeah, that's how I feel. And they tell you how to feel about your past. They tell you what to love and what to hate. They tell you what to do, and they're selling to you a path to happiness. And they believe you should listen to them. It's about who you're listening to. The influencers, the spiritual gurus of the world, of whom our world tells us this is where truth comes from. Go find what you want to believe. Go find someone who tells you what you want to hear and listen to them. The author is arguing that you should listen to Jesus, and he gives you 3 reasons why, and they are our outline for this morning. So point number 1, listen to this. Point number 1, listen to the Son because he is enthroned at the right hand of God as the heir of all things. Listen to the Son because he is enthroned at the right hand of God as the heir of all things. You see there that at the end of verse 2, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things. That's not a small detail, it's a title. In the Greek, it's a title of supremacy. It shows that Christ has the highest place in all the universe. Not only does everything belong to him, but everything exists for him. Everything is summed up in who he is. We saw this in Colossians, right? To him, through him, and for him are all things. And that's the point. That's the idea. And you notice there at the last line of our text in verse 3, making purification for sin, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty on high. He sat down at the right hand of the majesty on high. So there's movement in the text. He's accomplishing something. He made purification for sins. As our priest, he gave himself as a sacrifice for our sin. And then he sits down. Completed work, nothing left to do. At the right hand of the majesty on high, he entered into his inheritance after accomplishing his work. And so the idea that the author is presenting here is that when he finished the work the Father gave him to do, after completing that work, he gets the highest place of honor. The cross came first, then the crown. Sacrifice first, then the ruling throne. The humiliation came first, then the exaltation. And so to say that Jesus is the heir of all things, who sits at the right hand of God, means that he's in the place of supreme honor, royal authority, and finished victory. Finished, completed victory. He owns everything, rules everything, and speaks with a final authority over all things. And here's why the author needs you to know this about Jesus. Because all the other voices that you're listening to, none of them win like Jesus wins. None of them. I was scrolling through the internet, which I usually don't recommend. But, it's easy to find a blog or a post, or even our news sources are just posting personal stories. I found one of those. It was very polished and insightful, written by a young woman who had all the letters after her name, who was the professional, right? She knew. Well-written, first-person story about her history and her trauma and how that trauma experienced in past workplace environments led her to be humiliated and led her to difficulty in her current job. And then I read this line. The work isn't about fixing you. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. Think about that line. The work isn't about fixing you. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. Through lines like that and through stories, the world screams. It's teaching us things. Not only, that line sounds great. It connects. It's motivating. It's something we want to believe. Theologically, it's wrought with problems and wrought with worldly philosophies, this idea that who you are naturally is who you should be, and if you are more consistent and authentic to who you are on the inside, that's the place of happiness and fulfillment. All these worldly ideas are not only antithetical to Christianity, but there's much more problems, theological problems, that we could go through over and over again on these ideas. But there's two questions I want you to ask yourself when you encounter voices like this, when you're told stories like this, when the world shows you stories, and that's how the world teaches most often. Two questions to ask yourself. Does this person's life actually display the kind of wisdom, fruit, and faithfulness I should trust and imitate? Does this person's life actually display the kind of wisdom, fruit, and faithfulness I should trust and imitate? Do I know that this person's life is the kind of life I want to live? How's their marriage? Do their children hate them? How many times have they hurt the people around them? What's the result of the philosophies and values by which they live their life that we are now listening to? Are the people around them thankful for them? Are they holy? Are they whole? Are they fruitful? Most of those things you can't tell online. That's why the author of Hebrews will say, remember your leaders, know them. Look at the fruit of their lives. We'll see that in chapter 13, probably like 3 years from now at this pace. But you can't tell those things online. And first of all, the person who's writing a blog is selling you something. You just need to know that. They're selling you an idea. They're getting clicks. They're making money. Their revenue influence. They're monetizing things. Their status and how they present themselves feeds them this fake persona that they can present and curate online for us all to see. But who are they really? It's hard to tell online. But do they actually have the kind of life that you want to live? I think about this every time a parenting guru comes on, right? Early childhood development specialist. The real question is, what are their kids like? And you never hear that, you never see that. But that's essential. If you're going to listen, you need to know the results of what they believe. So that first question, does this person's life actually display the kind of wisdom, fruit, and faithfulness I should trust and imitate? The second question is this: can this person's message carry me all the way to death, judgment, and eternity, or does it only sound helpful right now? Does this person's message carry me all the way to death, judgment, and eternity, or does this only sound helpful right now? Because, yeah, sure, figuring out workplace difficulties is helpful on a blog, but does the values by which they navigate those things change their eternal destiny and how they will stand before God, either obedient or disobedient to His word? Does the voice actually lead to life? That's the question. Does it leave a person empty, alone, or lost when it matters most? Right? You have these ideas, and our world is inundated with self-fulfillment. And my question is, yeah, but what does that matter in the end? Like when you're on your deathbed, does that actually lead to anything? What's the circumstances by which these values will lead when you stand before God? Do they win in the end? And you don't know. You can't know. Most of them aren't dead yet. And so you're reading this blog and you're like, well, how does this help me stand before God in the end? Well, the results of the way they're living, and some of them you don't know, you can speculate. Many of the self-actualizing, self-fulfillment have alienated family. Everybody's toxic. And in the end, they're going to be alone, unaffected, the people around them unloved, and then they will stand before a holy and righteous judge. But the final, if you're going to listen to someone, you need to know the results of who they are and what they believe, which is why the author of Hebrews wants us to know that the Son of God is enthroned at the right hand of God as the heir of all things. Because Jesus, even though he suffered, he was obedient and won at a level which none can compare. And if you're going to listen to someone and find life in truth from someone, if you're going to obey somebody, you should listen to the guy who ultimately won everything and now stands at the most exalted, honored place in all of the world. And that's Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ alone. So listen to Jesus because he won. Listen to Jesus because he suffered all the things that you suffer. He walked through all the things that, all of our weakness and all of our difficulties, and he, in obedience to God, it won and is now being rewarded in such a way that we want to follow, and we should listen. That's the point. The cross came, then the crown. And if you want the crown, you should listen to the guy who walked through and suffered the cross. The sacrifice came first, and then the throne. And if you want real life, ruling at the right hand of God, the reward of faithfulness, you obey and you listen to the one who was faithful all the way to the end. Jesus speaks from a place of final victory. Don't listen to lesser voices. The author speaking in Hebrews is talking about the Son. Listen to him, because everyone else is just giving narrow-minded advice. They lack the experience. They lack the validity to hold authority for your ears. Everyone else is speculating. Jesus is ruling. So listen to him. Point number 2 is this. So for point number 1 is listen to the Son because he is enthroned at the right hand of God as the heir of all things. Point number 2 is listen to the Son because he is the creator and sustainer of all things. He is the creator and sustainer of all things. Not only is Jesus the heir of all things, he's also the creator that started all things. Hebrews says, through whom he created the world. The author of Colossians, Paul, we know who wrote Colossians. We don't know who wrote Hebrews. But Paul says that Jesus created all things, and there was not anything that was created that was not created through him. He says it positively and negatively. Jesus is not part of creation. He existed before creation. He is the uncreated creator. He's the one through whom all created things came into existence. And the language is actually even bigger than it seems in English, because when we see that phrase, that he is the creator of all, that he is the creator of the world, we think physical matter and the physical universe, which is true. But that's not the Greek word that's being used here for world. The Greek word that's being used here for world is actually the Greek word for the ages, for the eons. The idea is that he made history and is driving, he created every era, every generation, every chapter of the world's story is created by God. So it's a bigger idea than just God created matter. It's he's created this, everything that we've seen, and everything that has happened has been written by his hand. So when we speak of Jesus, we're not speaking of someone who showed up and is giving you his 30 years of life experience and telling you what to do at work or how to parent your kids because they've had 3. That's not who we're listening to. We're listening to the one who created all those things, who designed all those things. And even more so, in the parallel line, Hebrews says that he upholds the universe by the word of his power. Not only did he create all things, he's carrying them all. He didn't make the world and then step away from it. He didn't wind it up and then leave it to run by its own means. No, he feeds it. He directs it. He guides it. At this very moment, Christ is sustaining every aspect of the world's existence. At this moment, were he to take his pinky off, the whole thing would be obliterated. He holds it together, the psalmist says. Not only the physical universe, every star hangs in its place because of him. The laws of nature continue because of him. The breath in your lungs is filled by him. The beating of your heart is sustained by him. Every molecule, every mountain, every wave, every person upheld. Creation is not self-sustaining. And this idea that if we just would eliminate human influence, that would all be better and in balance is absurd and unscientific. The idea is your life itself is not self-sustaining. And it's not being held together by your power. It's being held together by Christ. That means that Jesus is not just working powerfully in the past, he's working presently in your life, in everything that you see. He's the one by whom all things continue. He's the one by whom all things grow. Man, and this changes everything. Because if life was an act of chance, then your fate, your governments, disease, markets, your humanity, and where you exist, where you will exist in the future is an act of chance. But that's not the reality. Your life is in the hands of Christ, who created all things, who upholds all things, and the world's not falling apart because it's in his control. And this is why you should listen to him. Right? Because Christ is exalted at the right hand of God, the heir of all things, because he's the creator and sustainer of the whole world, you should listen to him. Why? Because he created marriage. He knows how it should work. He is the one who made this, and he is the one who makes it fruitful and continues it moving and makes it work. He's not commenting on life, he's the source of it. He's not observing and giving you his observations. He upholds it, and he designed it. Everyone else is speaking from inside the system. Note that. Everyone else is speaking, giving you their 30 years life experience, and from inside the system, Jesus is the only one who sees the whole thing and who made it and who's working it. Imagine if I gave you a piece of a clock, just a small piece. Would you be able to figure out what it is? Even if I gave you one of the minute hand, would you be able to know what the whole thing was for? Would you be able to correctly identify the minute hand if you were only given the minute, let alone a cog, a gear? You would have no clue. From a limited perspective, from inside the system, not being able to see the whole, not the designer of the whole, you can't tell. And yet, we let podcasters tell us who we are. We let bloggers tell us about our identity. Influencers tell us how to live. Celebrities tell us how to vote, which is absurd. Wounded people disciple us in our healing. Blind guides explain the world to us. Hebrews says, why would you listen to them over the one who created the thing, over the one who holds it all together? So, think about it this way. If you got on an airplane this morning, you're traveling out across the country, you're on vacation, and the pilot gets on the speaker and says, we're having trouble with our fuel line, and I would like the passenger in 7B to tell me what he thinks is going on and how I should fix it. Right? That's not a good pilot, and that's not a good flight. Right, what you need is the guy who designed it, the guy who maintains it, the guy who works it, who understands the system. How foolish would it be to listen to the guy in the plane who only knows what it's like to sit on the plane? That's the limitation of their experience. You would never listen to the passenger in 7B about how the plane should fly and be fixed, because he's just another one of you. The Son who made the whole world speaks, who upholds the whole world speaks, and he's telling you truth. Seek him. Seek him. Why do we give so much weight to voices that didn't create or sustain and can't sustain us? Why are we letting someone who can't even hold their own life together, let it alone determine where they're going in the future, tell me how to live mine? Can that voice uphold you when your body breaks down? Can they fix you? Can they defeat death for you? No, only your creator and sustainer can. Can they uphold you when your plans collapse? They who can't even determine their own destiny? No. Can this voice uphold you when your mind is anxious, when your heart is grieving, when your future is uncertain? Who are you going to listen to, and why? The author of Hebrews argues that you should listen to the creator and sustainer of all things. Point number 3 is this. Listen to the Son because he is the full and perfect revelation of God. Listen to the Son because he is the full and perfect revelation of God. We are concluding with point number 3 because it's the center of that chiasm. That means it's the focus of this whole poem. It's the blazing center of the author's description of Jesus. The author of Hebrews says, He is the radiance of the glory of God, the exact imprint of His nature. Those parallel ideas found at the center tells us that if we want to know what God is like, we look at the Son. If you want to know how God thinks, how He acts, what He loves, what He hates, what God's holiness is like, what it means that He's merciful, how He enforces justice, then you just look at Jesus. Jesus is not merely someone who talks about God. He's not merely someone who points us towards God. He's not merely a messenger delivering divine information. He is the radiance of the glory of God. He is the light coming off of the sun. How do you know what the sun is like? You look at the light. And frankly, it shines on everything else so that you can know the reality of the world around you. Jesus is the light coming off of the Father. He is the glory of God shining. He's the brightness that streams from the light. The sun eternally shines the character, attributes, feelings, and person of God. He's not just reflecting it, He's shining it. He is the original revelation of God. He is the blazing truth of Him. The author also says he's the exact imprint of His nature. This is a common idea found throughout the New Testament. It means He's the stamp. He's the impression, the perfect corresponding imprint. Jesus does not vaguely resemble God. He's not thinking ideas of God, hoping who God should be. He's not guessing. He's not, frankly, interpreting Scripture like we are or like some others are. He's the exact thing. He perfectly reveals the very being of God because He is the co-eternal, truly God, fully man, divine, one and only God. This is why Jesus could say, "Whoever has seen me has seen the Father," John 14, verse 9. Not because Jesus is the Father, but because everything that is true of the Father is true of the Son. And that is why, brothers and sisters, we must listen to Jesus. You must listen to Jesus. If Jesus perfectly reveals God, then to listen to Jesus is to listen to God Himself. To reject Jesus is to reject God Himself. And to ignore Jesus is to ignore God. To reshape Jesus is to reinvent God in your image. And the only one speaking in, the author speaking in Hebrews is telling us that we shouldn't listen to religious teachers. Don't listen to spiritual gurus offering insight that originates with them, their thoughts on God. I'm not coming before you this morning giving you my ideas. I'm explaining the inspired word of God, which is the revelation of Jesus Christ who reveals the Father. That's what I'm doing this morning, and you shouldn't listen to me if I'm not doing that correctly. Jesus does not simply have helpful thoughts about God. He is how God has made Himself known. Jesus is not giving us opinions that are amongst a plethora of opinions. He is the truth of God in human flesh. Imagine someone coming to you this morning and telling you what your father was like. Right? Just being like, "Oh, yeah, I know Glenn. I read a book about him once. And I experienced this thing, and I imagined that this is what Glenn would do. I heard some stories. I learned just listened to some people describe him online. There was this book written by a guy who went through something hard and had some really cool ideas about Glenn. I pieced them together, and I've decided this is what Glenn was like. Are you going to listen to him? About your very own father? Because who knows the Father like the Son? That's the issue. The world says, let me tell you what God is like. Our feelings say, let me tell you what I want God to be. Our pain says, let me tell you what God should do. Our podcasts say, let me tell you what God could be. And our preferred ideology says, let me tell you what I wish God was. Hebrews says, Jesus has explained God completely and ultimately. And I don't need to guess anymore. I can know. We have to ask ourselves these questions. We have to remind ourselves of these truths. Because the world is trying to get us to listen to them. And our own hearts, brothers and sisters, want an easier version of Jesus, an easier spiritual reality. Brothers and sisters, when you're tempted by sin, the first thing you must do in order to excuse that sin and to walk in that path of sin is demote Jesus. He must no longer be the Son of God. He must be something lesser. So if you're going to leave your wife or move in with your girlfriend or cheat at work or whatever, the first thing your heart has to do is the first thing your heart is tempting you to do is to demote Jesus from being the Son of God with ultimate authority, revealing the truth from God that you should listen to a helpful arbiter of some ideas. When I'm tempted, my heart prefers a God of my own making that justifies the way I want to live rather than the God of the universe who tells me how to live, because only Jesus is exalted at the right hand of God and knows the way of life and wants us all to know him. That's the temptation, to exchange authoritative truth on life for my justified ideas that let me get away with whatever it is I want to do. We want a God without wrath. We want a God without holiness. We want God without exclusivity. We want God without authority. We want God without judgment. And so this theology and these truths have to be well developed in your mind, and not only that, they have to be worked out as a muscle regularly in your life. Otherwise, when temptation comes, you won't know how that muscle won't be well worked. That is why, brothers and sisters, you must filter everything you believe and everything that you hear with the singular question, what does Jesus think about this? Go to the text to find the answer to that question. Don't drift towards lesser versions of Jesus or lesser versions, lesser voices. Listen to the Son, because only the Son gives good news. The author of the book of Galatians, Paul says in Galatians that even if an angel came to you speaking a different gospel, you should not listen to him. And that's why the author of Hebrews is doing the same exact thing, because only Jesus tells us the words of life. Only Jesus. Only Jesus can tell us about our Creator, the holy God of the universe, who will let no sin go unpunished, who will not let the guilty go free. And only Jesus can show us the truth that the God of mercy and grace has made salvation free for all who would believe in the name and work of Christ. Only Jesus tells us the truth that we who suffer and believe here on this earth will be rewarded with eternity with Him through faith. And that faith, as it works out in our obedience, as we live our lives for His glory, is a life of joy that cannot be ruined by circumstances, trials, or difficulties. But Jesus tells us the good news, that He, right now, is with us. He's with His people who believe in Him, who are walking with Him, and we should listen to Him. That's what the Father is saying. That just as He said at the baptism of Jesus, "This is my beloved Son, listen to Him." Listen to Him. I want you to notice one last thing on this text. Look at the end of verse 2. In these last days He has spoken to us by His Son, whom He appointed heir of all things, through whom He created the world. He is the radiance of His glory, the exact imprint of His nature. He upholds the universe by the word of His power. After making purification for sin, He sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. That verse and a half takes us on a journey. At the beginning of the journey, Jesus is being appointed heir. At the end of the journey, He's sitting down and taking hold of all things. In the middle, He's revealed God and made purification for sins. It takes us on this journey with Jesus, from His pre-incarnate existence with the Father, to His exalted existence after the ascension at His Father's right hand. There's this journey that God in Jesus has gone through, and you should follow Him and obey Him. Because of where He started and where He ended, there's no one else who can speak to us words of life. Can I pray for you?